Katie's project was very conceptual, based around dusts that she's collected that predate the sun up to present day. The idea being that this, a large vessel similar to this would be richly filled with samples poured in, and that would layer up and give you a timeline between, obviously, the earliest one, which was predating the sun, up to present day. The real challenge with this one really was the precision. The size of the objects all had to be uniform, working on a really large scale for the urn. Made some hourglasses, which were worked in a flame working way, to caliper sizes. The other thing is it had to hold the volume of dust that's going to be poured into it. So a lot of experimenting with how that would work. Of course, which Katie did, and then came up with a volume to which we had to make it to. Yeah, so real precision. Also, we made over 430 of these objects to fill the urn. I think there's 373 samples in all. And these developed as well from a huge plethora of shapes. Some of them, we made samples to begin with that were like test tubes, and then some bowls with little lips. So various different forms as well for the urn. So there was like a large round moon jars, taller, thinner versions of this, something that's more like an amphora. Of course, needed to be the scale so that they could be properly tested. So yeah, real precision, everything in clear glass. So when you're gathering this much as well, you can get the odd bubble, you can get the odd mark. So you really want to, everything had to be very clean. And, these again, working to caliper sizes to make them all exactly the same. Make sure that the openings are the same size as well. A long process, a very repetitive process. The whole thing comes together with all the dust and the filling and everything else. I think it's going to look amazing. So the making process for something like the urn, we need a slightly larger team. So there's myself, Kalki, and Aaron Beck helped us as well with this one. So 3 people working in a team. First of all, we have to get the mass of glass to begin with. We then have to blow that up to the size that we need for the volume, and then the shaping. So there's lots of swinging out to get this long form, heating to a certain point.
Around this back. Thanks. Cheers. I'll take it first. Top down.
And then, of course, we have to turn the whole thing around and make the opening the other end. So this is where Kalki comes into his fore. He did a lot of the heat management for me while I concentrated on opening the rim, getting that really nice and thin. Again, it had to be to a certain dimension, so we have caliper sizes to measure everything. Really a slowly process to get the object away at the end. Yeah, so the process itself probably takes about an hour and a half, give or take 15 minutes or so. Usually give another 15 minutes, especially when you're working to such tight dimensions. And yeah, a team of 3 people. Because of the size of the object as well, you've got all the doors open on the reheating chambers. So, it's a hot, long drawn out process, and the object itself, of course, is very heavy. We've got that on the end of an iron as well, so that adds to the torque. It adds to how difficult things are to control, especially in the early stages when it's in a very molten form. As it sets up, it gets slightly easier to handle, but no less physical, shall we say. Great, mate. Each one of these contains 20 grams of matter. And of course, 20 grams of matter depends on what the matter is. So some things are much denser than others, so it's not going to be so much volume. Some things were so that's why these had to all be a certain size, so they could take the maximum amount of dust and the minimum as well at the same time. So the hot glass making process wasn't the only process involved in Katie's project. Again, Ayako Tani made some hourglasses which were worked in a flame working way but using a lathe. But it's because they had to be made to such a precise opening, you know, where the hourglass meets in the middle. There had to be a certain amount of dust that could pass through that at a certain time, so that the idea is that the time it takes for the dust to pass from one side of it to the other is, you know, a really important part of the object. I made some to begin with in hot glass, but you just can't get the aperture that thin without the object falling apart. So really going down the flame working route was the only way in which they could really be made. So again, you know, another very, very skillful, very drawn out process to make sure that the dust or the matter moves through the glass exactly the right rate for the volume that you have inside it. So, you know, lots of tiny little adjustments. Yeah, so as a maker, I think, you know, the real challenge is being pushed to make things a certain size, you know, as in it's a big object, but also the precision. You know, that's a really tough, especially when you're hand making. You know, when you're hand making, you think about you're using a liquid substance more or less to begin with, and the judgment of how much you get every time. You know, to make sure that everything is the right size, is the right shape. You have enough material. You don't have too much material, so the volume is the same in every object. You know, those are real challenges, and the repetition. And each one of these has to be finished by hand as well. So polishing 430 objects is not my idea of a fun day.
Super. Shut it. Yeah, start loving up. Thanks.